All right, so we've got a really interesting deep dive ahead of us this time. You guys have sent in a ton of stuff about UFO sightings, specifically around nuclear sites.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those topics that gets people talking.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of wild theories out there, but what we're going to try to do is stick to what we can actually verify.
Right, focus on the evidence. We'll look at those declassified government documents, those firsthand accounts you sent in, a lot from military personnel, and try to see if we can make sense of this apparent connection between UFOs and nuclear technology.
Yeah, because it's a pretty strange connection when you think about it.
It is.
But what really gets me is the sheer number of credible witnesses. I mean, we're not talking about, random people seeing lights in the sky. These are trained observers, military personnel, radar operators, people who know what they're looking at.
Yeah, their training really adds a layer of credibility, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And then you've got cases like Lieutenant Bob Jacobs, who claims he actually filmed a UFO shooting down a dummy nuclear warhead.
Oh, wow.
Back in 1964 at Vandenberg Air Force Base.
1964, huh? So this has been going on for a while.
Yeah, it seems like it. What's even weirder is that Jacobs claims the Air Force confiscated the film, deleted his records, and even threatened him to keep quiet.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
Yeah, that kind of secrecy definitely makes you wonder what they're trying to hide.
It does.
And it's not just happening in the U.S. either. You've got the Bentwaters incident in the U.K. in 1980.
Oh yeah, Bentwaters, that one's a classic.
Multiple witnesses saw these strange lights descending into Rendlesham Forest near RAF Bentwaters. And one of the witnesses, Sergeant Jim Peniston, claims he encountered a triangular craft and even had, get this, a telepathic download of binary code.
A telepathic download. Now that's something you don't hear every day.
Right. It's like straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
But the Bentwaters incident is interesting because it involved so many credible witnesses, including Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, who wrote a memo to the UK Ministry of Defense about it.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of speculation about whether or not nuclear weapons were actually removed from the base after the event, maybe for analysis.
That's a chilling thought. And what really grabs me is that these aren't just passive sightings. We're talking about reports of UFOs actually interfering with nuclear systems.
Interfering? How so?
Disabling missiles, activating launch sequences, even causing power outages. It's like they're toying with us,
It's a bit unsettling, to say the least.
It is. One of the most well-known examples of this is the 1967 incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana.
Okay, I've heard of that one. What happened?
10 ICBMs simultaneously went offline.
10 at the same time.
Yeah. And there were reports of this red glowing object hovering nearby. We actually have the testimonies of Robert Salas and Bob Jameson, who were both on duty that night. Salas was the missile launch officer, and Jameson was the missile targeting officer.
So these are guys who know their stuff.
Exactly. And they both maintain that those missiles went offline without explanation, and this UFO was spotted in the area at the same time. It's pretty hard to dismiss that.
Yeah, especially with two witnesses corroborating each other's stories.
It's not the only incident like this either. We have another account from Minot Air Force Base in 1966. David Schindale, a retired U.S. Air Force captain, claims that a UFO actually triggered a launch sequence for a nuclear missile.
Oh wow, so it wasn't just disabling them, it was actively trying to launch one.
That's what he claims, and he said he had to manually deactivate it to prevent a potential disaster.
If that's true, that raises some really serious questions. It suggests that these UFOs aren't just curious about our nuclear capabilities, they're actively trying to control them.
Yeah, it's like they're testing our defenses or something.
We're sending a message, maybe.
Maybe. But here's the thing, and this is what I don't get. If all this is really happening, why aren't we hearing more about it? You'd think this would be front page news all the time.
Right. You'd think so. But that leads us to the whole issue of potential cover-ups. You've got organizations like Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official UFO investigation program.
Right, Project Blue Book.
Yeah, they've been accused of downplaying or even dismissing UFO sightings for decades.
It often feels like there's this deliberate effort to keep this information under wraps, Like they don't want the public to know what's really going on.
And you have to wonder, why? What's the motivation for keeping this stuff secret?
Well, some people believe that the government is afraid of public panic, that if people knew the truth about UFOs, it would cause widespread chaos and disruption.
Others believe that the government might be trying to reverse engineer alien technology for its own purposes, and they don't want other countries to get their hands on it.
It's a bit of a conspiracy theory, I guess.
It is.
But you have to admit, it's not entirely implausible. especially when you consider the experiences of some researchers who have dedicated their lives to documenting this UFO nuclear connection.
People like Robert Hastings.
Exactly. Hastings has interviewed over 167 military personnel who've witnessed UFO activity at nuclear sites. And he's spoken about facing harassment, surveillance, and attempts to discredit his work.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to silence him.
It seems like it. And then you have the case of Edward Condon, the physicist who led that Condon committee back in the 1960s, remember?
Oh yeah, the UFO review panel.
Yeah, Condon was a well-known UFO skeptic, and his committee's final report essentially dismissed the whole phenomenon as a bunch of hoaxes and misidentifications.
But there's something interesting about Condon that a lot of people don't know. He was deeply involved in the world of atomic secrets. He was part of the Manhattan Project and had a close relationship with Robert Oppenheimer.
So he was in the inner circle of nuclear science.
Exactly. And that makes some people wonder if his involvement with the Condon Committee was really about debunking UFOs or if it was about protecting the secrets of the atomic age.
Interesting. So we have these incidents, potential cover-ups, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. It makes you wonder, who can we trust when it comes to information about UFOs?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that we need to keep in mind as we dive deeper into this rabbit hole.
I agree. We need to be discerning and look at each piece of information carefully, especially when dealing with a topic as sensitive and secretive as this.
Right, and we can't forget that these sightings aren't just ancient history. We've got reports of UFO activity near nuclear sites, even in recent years.
Like those incidents at F.E. Warren Air Force Base in 2010 and Nellis Air Force Base in 2015.
Yeah, the fact that this is still happening makes the whole thing even more relevant, doesn't it?
Definitely. It means that whatever's going on, it's not over yet. And we need to figure out what it means for the future.
So we've got these strange incidents, these potential cover-ups, and this ongoing mystery. The big question is, why? Why are these UFOs so interested in our nuclear capabilities?
That's the heart of the matter, isn't it? And there are a lot of theories out there, but it's tough to know what to believe.
Some people believe they're benevolent protectors concerned about our reckless use of nuclear technology.
Others believe they have more sinister intentions, maybe even trying to exploit us for their own gain.
And then you've got those who believe we're all living in a simulation, and these UFOs are just the programmers observing our every move.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. But that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're going to try to sort through all these theories, examine the evidence, and see if we can make some sense of this whole UFO nuclear connection.
It's going to be a wild ride. Okay, so let's dig into these theories a little bit. One of the most popular ones is that these UFOs are like these benevolent protectors. You know?
Yeah, the guardians of the galaxy looking out for us silly humans.
Exactly. The idea is that they're concerned about our nuclear capabilities, and they're trying to prevent us from destroying ourselves.
Yeah, that's a nice thought. But how do we know they've got our best interests at heart?
That's the thing. We don't. It's all speculation, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at some of those incidents we talked about, like the Malmstrom case, where those missiles went offline,
Right.
it's almost like someone or something intervened to prevent a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to harm us, you'd think they would have done it by now, right? They certainly seem to have the technology.
That's true. But there's another theory that's a little bit more unsettling. It's called the parasitic host theory.
Parasitic host. Okay, that doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't. The idea here is that these UFOs might not be so benevolent after all. It could be like parasites exploiting our resources, manipulating us for their own gain.
Like those alien invasion movies where they come to Earth to steal our water or something?
Right, except in this case, maybe they're after our nuclear technology or our knowledge.
So they're using us.
Possibly. And some people point to the fact that they seem to be particularly interested in our nuclear sites as evidence for this theory.
Yeah, I can see that. But if they were truly hostile, wouldn't they be more aggressive? Why just disable missiles or mess with power grids when they could, do a lot more damage?
That's a good question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. It's one of the big paradoxes of this whole UFO phenomenon. They seem to be capable of incredible things, yet they often act in ways that are difficult to understand.
Like they're playing by a different set of rules.
Maybe. Or maybe we're just not seeing the whole picture. Remember that simulation theory we talked about?
Oh, yeah. The one where we're all living in a computer program? Still not sure what to make of that one.
It is pretty mind-bending, but if it's true, it could explain a lot. Maybe these UFOs are the programmers, the ones who created the simulation,
Huh.
and they're just observing us, seeing how we behave.
Like we're lab rats in a giant experiment.
Maybe. Or maybe they're just curious about us, like we'd be curious about a colony of ants.
And what about those glitches in the simulation? Is that how we explain those UFO sightings?
Possibly. Some people believe that these UFOs could be glitches in the Matrix, Evidence that our reality isn't what it seems.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious sci-fi territory.
I know. But it's fun to speculate, right? And who knows, maybe there's some truth to it.
Yeah, you never know. But getting back to those more down-to-earth theories, let's talk about the benevolent protector idea a little more.
Okay, so the benevolent protector theory.
Yeah, what are some of the arguments in favor of that one? Is there any evidence to support it?
Well, like we were saying before, there are a number of historical accounts that, if they're accurate, seem to suggest that these UFOs might be intervening to prevent us from using nuclear weapons.
Right, like that incident at Malmstrom where those ICBMs were disabled.
Yeah, and there are similar accounts from other nuclear facilities around the world. If you view these events through the lens of the benevolent protector theory, it implies that these UFOs are concerned about our destructive potential and are, well, trying to save us from ourselves.
Okay, but how can we be sure their idea of protection is the same as ours?
We can't. That's the thing. We're dealing with the unknown here.
Yeah.
We don't know their motivations or their ethics. What we might see as a protective act could be something else entirely to them.
That's a good point. What about the parasitic host theory? How does that one stack up?
Well, this theory is a bit more unsettling, like we said. It suggests that these UFOs might not be here to help us at all. They could be a force that exploits resources and manipulates other species for their own benefit.
So like they're using us, like we use farm animals or something.
It's a disturbing thought, but that's the basic premise of the theory.
I mean, I guess it makes sense. They seem to be interested in our nuclear technology, so maybe they see it as something valuable they can exploit.
Exactly. And there are those who argue that the very fact they hasn't been more openly hostile is evidence that they're playing a long game, slowly infiltrating our society and manipulating us from behind the scenes.
Okay, now that's just creepy.
It is a bit creepy, but it's one of the possibilities we have to consider.
So we've got these benevolent protectors on one hand and these parasitic exploiters on the other. It's like a cosmic good cop, bad cop routine.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild spectrum.
And then, of course, we've got that simulation theory, which is a whole other can of worms.
Right, the idea that our reality is just a computer program.
Still trying to wrap my head around that one.
It's definitely a mind-bending concept, but it could explain those apparent inconsistencies in UFO behavior. Like maybe those glitches we see are just errors in the program,
So instead of aliens, we're dealing with some cosmic programmer who's not very good at their job.
Something like that.
I don't know, that's almost more unsettling than the thought of actual aliens.
It is kind of a humbling thought, isn't it? That our reality might not be as real as we think it is.
It is. But even if the simulation theory is true, we still have to live in this reality, whatever it may be.
That's true, and maybe that's the point these UFOs are trying to get across, regardless of their true nature.
What do you mean?
Well, maybe their interest in our nuclear capabilities is a sign that we need to take this stuff seriously.
You mean be more careful?
Exactly. More careful, more responsible.
And maybe a little bit scared.
A healthy dose of fear can be a good motivator, I think. It can push us to be better, to make wiser choices.
So where do we go from here?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in terms of the theories. Maybe now we should look at some specific cases, see if we can apply these different lenses and maybe shed some light on what might be going on.
So we've talked about a lot of incidents at military bases, but it's not just military bases, is it?
No, not at all. We also have a number of reports of UFO sightings near nuclear power plants, like civilian facilities.
Yeah, and even research facilities, places where, they're studying nuclear physics and stuff. It seems like it's not just about the weapons themselves.
It's about the technology itself, yeah.
The ability to, harness atomic energy.
Exactly. It's almost as if they're fascinated by our ability to manipulate these fundamental forces of the universe.
Yeah. Makes you wonder about their own level of technology, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
You have to wonder if they've got even more advanced ways of harnessing energy. And if they are, what are they doing here? Are they studying our methods? Are they trying to learn from us? Or maybe even warn us about some dangers we haven't even thought of yet?
Yeah. The thought that we might be messing with forces we don't fully understand is pretty sobering.
It is.
What if they're trying to, steer us towards a safer path?
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
especially when you consider the potential consequences if something goes wrong, right? I mean, a nuclear accident or an attack, it's not just about the devastation to human life. It's about the impact on the planet itself.
And it's not just the physical dangers either. I mean, these UFOs, they seem to be able to mess with our communication systems, our power grids. Even some people even suggest they can affect our perception of reality.
Yeah, there are a lot of stories out there about people feeling disoriented or having missing time after a UFO encounter.
It's like they're messing with our minds. Like that thing at F.E. Warren Air Force Base, remember? Where 50 ICBMs went offline during a power outage.
Oh yeah, that was a big one.
What if that wasn't just a coincidence? What if it was a deliberate demonstration of their power? Like they were showing us what they could do if they wanted to.
It's definitely a thought-provoking idea.
It is. And it makes you realize how vulnerable we might be.
Absolutely. We tend to think of ourselves as the dominant species on this planet, but these incidents suggest that, well, maybe we're not.
Yeah, it's humbling, to say the least.
It is.
And, we haven't even talked about the psychological impact all of this has on people. I mean, those who have these encounters, they often describe feelings of awe, fear, even a sense of spiritual transformation.
Yeah, it's like those encounters challenge their entire worldview. Everything they thought they knew about reality is suddenly thrown into question.
So, where do we go from here? We've looked at all these incidents, we've explored these different theories. How do we even begin to make sense of it all?
So I think the key is to maintain a balance.
Yeah.
A balance of curiosity and critical thinking. We need to keep investigating, keep asking questions, keep gathering evidence, but we also need to be careful about, jumping to conclusions.
Yeah. It's like walking a tightrope between open-mindedness and skepticism, right? You got to be willing to consider new ideas, but also be rigorous in your analysis.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that this is an ongoing process. We may never have all the answers, but each new piece of information, each new encounter, brings us a little bit closer to understanding the true nature of this phenomenon.
It's like the journey is just as important as the destination.
That's a good way to put it. It's about expanding our awareness, pushing the boundaries of our knowledge, and facing those big mysteries head on.
So should we just embrace the mystery, keep asking those questions, and never stop searching for the truth, even if we never actually find it?
I think so. I think that's the best approach.
Pleasure.
Because as we've seen in this deep dive, the truth about UFOs, especially their interest in our nuclear capabilities, is far more complex and fascinating than we could have imagined.
Yeah, that's for sure. So to wrap things up, I think it's safe to say there's definitely something going on here. Something strange, something we don't fully understand.
Yeah. The connection between UFOs and nuclear technology is too strong to ignore. There are just too many credible witnesses, too many unexplained incidents.
So what do you think it all means?
Honestly, I don't know, but I think it's a question we all need to be asking. And maybe the answer lies somewhere out there, waiting to be discovered.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a wild ride exploring all those fascinating and sometimes frightening accounts and theories. And as always, we encourage you to keep digging, keep researching, and keep those minds open. Because the truth, as they say, is out there.